Okay, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really cool prototype preview from a new brand to the channel. It's actually called AISION. And essentially, they're a Hong Kong-based micro brand with an eye for complex finishes and dynamic dials, as you can see here by this model that was kindly lent in. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this an everyday watch. And when you're looking for something within this genre, of course, you're going to want that versatile blend of both sporty and dressy attributes. This is from their Hang series, and it's the AN-HS01. And it's essentially an update to their original Hang series line, combining Japanese Momentum Factory Ori's unique copper aging and Hazuka Inc.'s gold leaf finish into a beautifully crafted dial. And I have to say, this thing is pretty spectacular. Look at now, this isn't a painted dial. This is actually like artisan crafted, which I think is beautiful. Like essentially the dial color that you're seeing here is due to the aging and the patina, forced patina for the copper dial itself, which is great. And then of course they do have the beautiful gold leaf accent. So this thing is pretty cool. It's only going for $668 direct. And then there actually are some pre-orders that may still be available, as well as Kickstarter deals. So definitely check the links down in the description, or you can hit a little quick Google search. But these are kind of estimated for delivery around the end of December 2024, depending on when you're watching this. So just real quick, this is a 40 millimeter kind of Genta-esque piece, but I will say the execution here is really where it differs from a lot of those other, again, those kind of steel sports watch, I would say almost gimmicky type of watches. This one goes another direction and really combines a lot of handwork and, again, that kind of artisanal take to this platform, which I think is really, really cool. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so let's take a look. Now, of course, this integrated steel sports setup is going to be very popular these days, but some things, again, where they really venture off into really boutique level of, the artisan nature of the finishing here. Check out these bevels. I mean, this reminds me of some very expensive Japanese boutique models that I've reviewed recently on my channel that are quite expensive, and I have to say, like, if you put another name on the dial, and this thing would be I could see it fetch a very high premium. And the models that I'm referring to, I don't want to take anything away from here, but those ones actually had just out of box Swiss movements that were lightly modified. Here you're not going to have that. You're going to have a Miyota, but one could also say that that is a little bit more in line with a Japanese kind of boutique style of watch. So I'd say, like, I like that, although this is a very popular type of genre right now, this is also very different, like in terms of its approach and the way that it's trying to do and achieve what it is. So with that said, diameter, like I mentioned, 40 millimeters. Thinness here, only 10.8 millimeters, so very, very nice. And you can see it even has a thin profile. Sometimes, a watch might have thin ultimate specs, but then the profile itself doesn't necessarily visually read as thin. I will say here, you're going to absolutely have that. Look at that thin mid case with that very nice high polished bevel, very nice sharp transitions, and not sharp to the touch, but sharp to the eye. Of course, with those high polished bevels, you're going to see a couple of extra fingerprints here and there. Let me just wipe those off and try to give you a fair look at, oh my goodness, look at that. Very, very cool. The beveled edges and that theme just carries through so beautifully. Now, getting into the lug to lug, 46 millimeters, guys. So although this is an integrated bracelet design, so short lugs aren't necessarily a necessity, they're definitely very welcome, especially when you see the way that the case turns down. So this is really going to guide this to hug your wrist really well, especially playing off of that thinner mid-case profile. Now, of course, this is going to be all stainless steel in terms of the construction, very nicely brushed and polished. The sapphire here is nice and flat, so that is what's aiding in the thinness as well. And it does have an inner air coating. Now, the bezel itself, you guys can see, has a nice vertical brushing to it, and that nice toothy gear kind of bezel. It is a fixed bezel, it can't turn, but those notches, I do think, add a nice bit of visual interest, as well as make it feel a little bit more industrial and overbuilt at the same time, while still keeping quite a thin profile. So it keeps it to a much more contemporary style versus, there's a lot more of kind of, I would say, the quote unquote retro styles of these types of builds really flooding the market today. A lot of them are really kind of keying into that 70s aesthetic. But here, I think this definitely feels a lot more modern, which I think, again, it adds differentiation versus some of the other platforms that might have a similar use case. Now, the movement, you can see, is a Miyota 9015. So 42-hour power reserve, 4 hertz. Actually, let me try to get it to focus more so on there. The camera's wanting to focus on the clasp, but let me just, there we go. So not that you've never seen a Miyota 9015, but there it is. So very nice. And of course, this is a pre-production prototype, so I wouldn't be surprised if there were some more, decoration in the future coming to these models. Now, one thing also I forgot to mention, guys, is going to be the crown. Check that out. Very, very nice. It's actually a screw down crown that is very nicely signed as well, which I can appreciate. So check that out. Nice toothy grip there. Again, it kind of goes within the theme. There's a lot of flats here. There's a lot of angles. It's very complex, and I think it really suits this dial, which, although the dial itself is quite flat, it's quite complex in terms of the actual execution and the finish here. And then, of course, you get into the dial furniture. Those indices are amazing, guys. These are applied indices. These are just gorgeous, and they're on top of this manually patinaed copper dial with the gold leaf accents. Everything just pops. There's such a nice amount of contrast and visual play that's going on here, and it's not through any distortion. It's a flat sapphire crystal, so you're getting a nice front row seat when it comes to the execution, the multifaceted and finished aspects of the handset of those very nice applied indices. So it's, again, it's a good look. I'm digging it. Also, you're getting 100 meters of water resistance, which is outstanding, especially with that screw down crown. So it's going to be very confidence inspiring. So this doesn't just have the look of a porthole, it actually does also have the water resistance to kind of go with that aesthetic, which I can appreciate. Now, the bracelets, you're going to see, of course, nicely integrated design here, solid H links. There's a very nice classic, one could almost say dramatic taper from about 26.5 millimeters down to about 17.9, so almost 18 millimeters down here on the underside. And I'm glad they didn't taper too much further from that, because I think it helps the bracelet flow much better because there is no clasp. Now, if there was a clasp, you would want a deeper taper because the clasp would be a little bit wider, and then, the links have to feed into it. The fact that they went with the push button butterfly style deployant, it's nice that they actually kept it closer to 18 millimeters on the underside. For me, I feel like that adds just a little bit more of a sporty touch. Let me give it a quick little wipe here. And just overall, not just sporty, but I think proportional to the rest of, again, although it is thin, it does have this overbuilt and kind of beefy aesthetic at the same time. So great juxtaposition between kind of line weights and everything as you're looking at this, as you're wearing it. It does have a premium screw pin construction, which is fantastic. And then again, it's actually even signed here at the opening to that clasp, which I think is quite handsomely done. So with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, I think this wears really well. Now, of course, it does have that wider integrated stance, so it does really take up a nice amount of wrist real estate, but you can also see that, again, it does fit really nicely and quite ergonomically, especially considering all of the angles and facets that you're going to have here. So very flat, but still tons of wrist presence, which I can appreciate. And again, this isn't meant to be, a retro kind of vintage sized type of watch. I mean, it's meant to feel quite contemporary and modern. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the lens here, you're going to actually have some perspective distortion. It's going to make the watch just feel a little bit bigger than it actually is. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just work to tighten up the frame here if I can. Let's go ahead and bring that in so that you guys can get, still a detailed look, but just at a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. Guys, and I dig this. Check that out. So yeah, it's not petite. It's not a dress watch. It's not something like that. This is definitely one that is going to catch attention, and I don't have a problem with it because as you look at, there's substance to that attention grabbing aspect. I mean, the facets, the solid nature here, all of the angular work that they've done, it looks great. And I like that it, not only does it draw you in, it actually pays you off for being drawn in because there are so many fine details. I mean, then, speaking of details, check out that freaking dial. Wow. It's very, very special. And again, I probably use the word artisanal way too many times in this review already, but that's the best way I can describe it. I mean, this is a work of artistry. This is not by any means, a factory comes along and they're just filling a gap in the market. This isn't somebody just looking to sell another Genta-esque sports watch. This is a brand that has a vision, that has a clear enthusiasm for the artistry of watchmaking, and they really came together and combined so many beautiful aspects in terms of the finish, in terms of the design here, that I can't help but be, pretty impressed. So with that said, although again, this isn't some type of diver or anything sports dedicated, the nice thing is they do have full loom and everything. So we're going to want to see how that pans out in terms of a low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Ooh. So yeah, not a fully loomed dial, so hopefully nobody got that mistaken, but fully loomed indices. And again, for considering just how nice this watch looks, they didn't really have to do much to make it look good in the dark. I mean, the light is really where you want to see this piece, but I do appreciate that they said, okay, well, this is a sporty watch. It has 100 meters of water resistance. We want people to be able to wear this piece of art every day. So, hey, let's make sure that there's good amount of legibility at night. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And my goodness, guys, for a watch that has so much going on in terms of the case, in terms of the dial, it's still super legible. I absolutely appreciate that from a functional level, they didn't compromise. This is still a very readable, still a very well-balanced dial. And, of course, it's fun to look at because of just how gorgeous it is. And again, that it almost feels like a piece of canvas, like a paper that has just been beautifully painted, but this isn't paint. I mean, those are gold flakes. This isn't, blue, turquoisey, teal paint. That is natural patina from oxidation, forced, patina onto a metal material, right? Onto a copper, brass, or bronze mixture. So I dig it. And look at the hands. Look at the way that they're capturing light. in different ways thanks to the different faceting that's done on there. They have brushing, they do have the brushed areas playing off of the high polished areas, which means there's going to be more contrast. They're able to really keep this quite legible and readable. So very, very cool here, guys. We'll go ahead and get all the lights back up and running and get into some closing thoughts. So on the wrist, very slim yet substantial, which is key because you don't want something like this to feel flimsy. Like it looks expensive and it does feel expensive too, which is great. So it's just beautifully sculpted and faceted. It drapes comfortably on the wrist as well. In terms of model variants, check the site links in the video description for options and availability, as there are actually a couple of options that forego the gold leaf. So if you're not into that, there are definitely some other options for you. For me, I think this one really stood out. But it makes sense that it would. I mean, this is them really swinging for the fences in terms of the execution here. In terms of comparable models, while yes, the integrated steel sports watch space is more flooded with competition than ever, I think AISION's more artisanal approach to its design details helps separate it from, the sea of potential rivals that are out there. Like, I don't think somebody would necessarily cross-shop this against a PRX or something like that. Like, those are great watches. I own one myself. I've done multiple videos on it and why it's such a great value. But this there's nothing that reads as, oh, we're just value searchers. We're not just racing to the, to say, hey, this is the cheapest, most expensive looking watch you can get. It's really just trying to be the best form of itself. And thanks to choices like putting a thin Miyota movement inside of it, you're able to still get it at a pretty affordable, reasonable price, especially for a new brand. You're not paying for a bunch of marketing. You're not paying for, annals and annals and annals of history and heritage. This is a new brand that's creating its history right now. So for me, guys, bottom line, the case and bracelet execution on their own, I think, are worth your attention. Then add to that the unique dial, and I think you have something truly special, especially especially so underneath the $1,000 price point. Like this, again, with a different brand, and it doesn't even have to be like a super name brand or super old brand. I mean, there are young boutique Japanese brands out there that are charging quite premium prices for stuff like this, for stuff with complex case finishes, with complex styles, that really dive into an appreciation for that Japanese craftsmanship and artistry. And although this is a Hong Kong based brand, again, the two, for the dial, this is, definitively very, very Japanese in terms of the execution, and I dig it. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.